Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Cepin. The following podcast is a joint podcast between Faith Over Breakfast and Healing the City. Healing the City podcast is a podcast I do for the Village Church in Tucson, Arizona, where I'm one of the pastors. This particular podcast is an interview between my father, John Cepin, and myself as we chat about what it looks like to do ministry. It is in two parts, and I hope you enjoy. Also, very quickly, I would like to address the ads that you may have heard in Faith Over Breakfast. This is just a little experiment that we've been doing to try to offset some of the costs of hosting a podcast over a long period of time. In particular, it costs about $18 to host this podcast every month. And also, there is a little bit of maintenance when it comes to microphones and things like that, plus our time when it comes to editing and recording. So, we tried these ads. These ads help offset some of this cost. But also, I'd like to make a note very quickly that if you wish, you can subscribe to this podcast. You can become a subscriber, and it's like, I think, $3 a month, $5 a month, or $10 a month. It's not very difficult. There's a link in the show notes, and that will also help offset the costs. And also eliminate the ads if we are able to get enough subscribers to pay for the hosting. So with all that said, if you're like me and you listen to the little, hey, support us, you probably fast forward it. But I'm just inviting you to help continue this ministry, and we thank you for your listenership. But if you can't financially support it, at least please subscribe and share it and give us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Thank you. All right. Welcome to the Healing the City podcast. And actually today also this is going to be a dual podcast because this is getting posted also on Faith Over Breakfast. So if you don't know about Healing the City podcast, people from Faith Over Breakfast, Andy was out of town and I didn't have a podcast, and so I thought I'd let you in on the other one. So we're doing a little dual one. And this is a continued interview and conversation with my father, John Cepin, and we're just hanging out and chatting. And so there's a whole bunch of them on Healing the City. I think a whole bunch. There's about 5 or 6 now.
Yes.
Yeah. So hi, Dad. It's good to see you.
Good morning and happy birthday.
Thank you, Dad. I'm 51.
Right. April 19th, 1972.
Yeah. That's when I was born.
You were born about between 9:30 and 10 a.m. How's that?
So I am not yet 51. Oh, I got a little bit of time to enjoy my last hours of being 50.
Yeah, I remember the day.
Yeah. What happened on the day?
Well, I got into Palo Verde High School and I knew Mom was close, but anyway, I got there. The head of the department looked at me and said, "You need to head to the hospital right now. We got you covered. See you later." And then I hustled to the hospital. Yeah, that's kind of how that went down.
Wow. And in those days, they didn't let the dads in the birth.
No, they didn't.
So you just had to sit out there and wait.
Right.
Were you waiting by yourself, or were there other people there?
No, I was by myself.
Oh, wow. So that's a whole different kind of thing than it is nowadays.
Right.
Now everybody's in the birthplace, and everybody's involved, and everybody's doing something.
Yeah.
It's changed. The world has changed. But yeah, so I'm 51. And
wow, how's that feel?
I don't know. I think there are. I mean, when you're 51 or 50, and the older you get, the more you like you say, you start looking back. You have more to look back on, so you can think about all the choices you've made and all the choices you didn't make, and what's resulted up to this point.
That's true.
So. I don't know. I enjoy the life that I have lived and am living, but obviously, I think the question that every person asks is, well, did I make a meaningful impact that is going to last beyond me? Right?
Right.
So that's certainly something that you start trying to process. Or, I don't know, like I was trying to think. I actually do remember your 50th birthday party because I remember helping mom a lot. See, how old would I have been? You are 80?
Mm-hmm.
And you're 80.
Right.
So
my 50th birthday party would have been 1992.
Right. So
is that right?
I don't know. Dad, you're the mathematician. I am 51 and you are 80.
50. Yeah, 50 and 42 is 92.
Yeah.
It was August. And there were a lot of people that came down.
Yeah, so I was probably 21, right? 21. 1992, 72. So yeah, do the math. I was 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of
21. But yeah, anyway.
There were a lot of people that I didn't know were. I mean, it was a surprise, actually.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
Yeah, the people like Mike Wild and he pastored Craycroft Baptist. Herman Serenades, who I worked under at Miami High School for 2 years.
Yeah, you had there's a lot of people there.
Steve and Celeste Tracy. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so just saying that, like, I think I don't know where I was going with that, but just the sense of impact and the sense of like life. I think like hitting when you're 50 is like, okay, well, I got 30 years, maybe like 30 effective years if God's gracious enough. But as you can attest, you get tired the older you get. When emotional things are more like your body doesn't handle all of the stress the same way anymore.
It doesn't. That's for sure. So
it's like, I don't know, like, I guess the question becomes like, well, what am I going to do with this next 30 years of my life? I supposedly have all of this wisdom, and I think I'm probably unlike a lot of people in my generation. I've been in the same basic job for 25 years.
As a shepherd pastor.
Yeah, I've been doing the same thing, and sometimes those things, I don't know, like you're like, okay, so am I going to do this for the next 25 years, or am I going to do something different? Or
so as you think back of being a pastor, what brings joy to your heart?
Oh, that's a good question. What brings joy to my heart? Well, there's a couple of interesting things that I just get me really excited, and one is to see children who are little kids in the beginning now having kids and being part of the community. So that's really cool, seeing people having grown up and found spouses who love Jesus and having babies and thinking about what it looks like to raise a family, and that's cool. That's one thing. I think the other thing is watching people who over the long haul have walked through hard things and seeing them choose to follow Jesus in the midst of those and see the benefits of that over the years, to see how that works out. I think that brings a lot of joy to me in the process of things. I think just watching, I don't know, like being able to walk with people over a long period of time and have long, deep friendships with people, and to know how deeply they've loved Jesus and fight for that, and how they're overcoming, sometimes, a lot of times, really hard childhoods and hard events in their life. So that's cool. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think other parts of being a pastor is just it's exciting to watch Jesus do stuff. Like, you get to be sometimes a lot more on the front lines of watching Jesus do stuff. You also get to be on the front lines of watching things fall apart. So those are kind of the tensions of life.
Yeah, what have those been like for you?
I think it's hard to have to. I think long-term pastorship, long-term shepherding, means that you become very intertwined in things, and it can be really emotionally overwhelming. And I feel like you can easily kind of shift to Well, I think a thing that you do as a parent even is just as your children get older, you begin to think, well, if I had made this choice or if I had done this thing, then this would be different. And because I didn't do these things, well, now God's allowing this to happen, and he's not, there's kind of, you can make it very much, about poor choices that you made, or it's your fault, or it's their fault. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like, there's a lot of regret. It can be regret, which is fine. But when you begin, you can blame yourself. Does that make sense? Like, you blame, like it's my fault that this is happening, because if I had chosen to do this instead of that, or I hadn't said this thing, or I'd been more available, or, then this wouldn't be happening.
Right. So it's kind of but that sounds like an airplane spinning out, heading for
heading for the ground. Right. No, I'm just saying that is one of the harder that is. Well, I think because the enemy is the accuser of the brethren, and certainly you have your own accusations, but the enemy is certainly present to pile on, like, and make agreement and create space for, I think, shame and self-condemnation, and also just, I think Satan would like us to live a religion like the ancient religions. Basically all religion is built around the idea that you do some stuff and you appease the gods, or you control the gods. And I think the enemy would like us to be there, that like God only operates based on our behavioral choices.
Right.
And if we can get them all right, then he'll do what we need him to do. We'll be blessed, or things will work out for people. And I think maybe, I don't believe that at all, but in the subtext of my narratives, right? And that's definitely when you start looking back when you get older, or when you've just been a pastor a long time, or a parent, or
right. You have regrets. We talked a little bit about wanting to talk about that, but I'm just thinking that when God is faithful, and he will strengthen us, and he will protect us from the evil one.
Yeah.
Thessalonians. But on the other hand, you were talking about the accuser of the brethren, and as a pastor, I have a sense that pastors are accused quite a bit by Satan.
Yes, I think so.
And so what's nullified, and I regret my choices, but what gets nullified, it appears, is grace, redemption.
Sure.
Those categories that, God is gracious and merciful and loving. His loving kindness has said it's there. But yeah, so as a pastor, I guess a question I have, you hear this question, who pastors you, Eric?
Sure.
You hear that question. Has anyone ever asked you that?
People ask me that all the time.
How do you respond?
Well, I think for a couple things, I actually think it's a bad question, because my experience is that pastors have separated themselves from their congregation. I feel like one of the most, like, what kind of shaped my thinking on this was when I worked in the Evangelical Presbyterian Church for a Evangelical Presbyterian Church. When I was there, before I started working for the church, the pastor decided to leave very suddenly and in a very dramatic way. And what we were told was, because it was a Reformed denomination, is that we as a congregation had no say. That the people that were his church and his community was the denomination and the collection of pastors. And so they were responsible for him, but we had no impact. And for me, and people will tease me at church about this, but and I have been teased about this, but I am very much into the theology of the priesthood of all believers, which I am learning is actually maybe not as prominent a theology as I thought it was, and maybe even some people have some suspect about it. But I really, 1 Peter 2 is a big deal to me. And that means that when people ask me who shepherds you, my hope is that my community shepherds me. That they, certainly the body of elders and deacons or lead ministers, as we call them at the village. But I would say the community, and they have, because I think, Jesus says that, or Paul says that and you'll do the reference here probably better than I can, but that Jesus confounds the wisdom of the world is in Corinthians.
Corinthians, yeah.
But by working through the foolish and weak of the world, right? That's my paraphrase of it. But that's important to me. Like the weak and the foolish, us, have an opportunity to pastor me. And so I hope I make myself available to that. And part of that is to be willing to put myself under submission by being honest when people ask me how I'm doing, and then to listen to them without correction. Meaning, even if I think you're like 80% wrong about what you're offering me, what I see is that the Holy Spirit is going to speak through what they have to say, even if they don't have the discernment and insight they need. And so for me, I would say my congregation does that. And I think they had been hard on me at times and said hard things to me and asked me to do things and told me things that I needed to do. So I think, I don't... The other thing is I'm a very different pastor, and village pastors are very different. I was telling Mark in our elder meeting yesterday, and it's really how I feel. It's like when I'm around other pastors, I feel like I'm from Ireland and they're from England. I understand what they're saying, but they mean something a little bit different than I do. And when I speak, everybody just looks at me a little strange, right? Because my accent's weird. Some of the words I use is weird, and it doesn't make sense to them. And I often feel that way around pastors. I don't feel that way around the village and around villagers, because there's but you're
really Ukrainian, Eric.
Yeah, there you go. I'm really Ukrainian.
Let's not go there. But
well, I mean, even just at the village, and
that's a good point.
Most people at the village can look at me and say, "Well, hey, Eric, that's actually a bad goal." And what's the demand there? That's an easy, like almost every villager has been discipled at the village can easily ask me that question, and what's going on? So I mean, even just that simple language there is not something that's common in the church.
Well, it's not.
And I mean, it's
because you're looking at.
It's because we're very influenced by crab, but we're also very influenced by the idea of
purpose. Intentions need to be looked at rather than just change this and. So that's
So that's kind of, so I do believe that the community of God should be able, and I think they do. I know it's not that I have gone away to retreats and had other pastors speak into my life, but not ones that just watch me every day, and I think my congregation watches me, and they do, not maybe everyone, but many of them feel free to step in and speak to me and want to take care of me, and I've been honest enough from the pulpit that people know where I'm at. So,
well, that's I don't. Well, there's a lot that was said there. Let me just summarize the priesthood of all believers. Actually, I need to stop qualifying. You grew up with that.
Yeah, I did grow up. I mean, that was a big part of my childhood.
Yeah, the Brethren Assembly movement. Is that I was a full-time worker in for about 10 months, and another story for another time. However, when we were at the Bible Chapel,
which is right on the corner of Grant and
I mean, so the three major distinctives of the Brethren movement, or they've been called Plymouth Brethren. They don't buy into that, but I don't even know where the different chapels across the country. Priesthood of all believers. Also, the importance of very special breaking of bread every week with more than just giving it 2 minutes.
Right.
It really an emphasis on that. And also the other thing is the multiplicity of eldership.
Yeah.
And so did I say that correctly? Multiplicity, that's not the right word.
It's okay.
The eldership is important, having elders in the church. And in fact, at the Bible Chapel, obviously, and many other of the Bible chapels or gospel halls, as they're called across the country, they're actually, I guess, lay people. There's no paid pastors, except they do have full-time workers occasionally, which I was one. But even then, I mean, they're really restrict on who could be an elder. I wasn't at that time. I was considered too young at 41. So, But but it's interesting, priesthood of all believers, with that in mind, then there is the key word is responsibility. The church, the community has a responsibility to care for their pastor.
Yes.
That's very, I mean, do you have anything more to say? I mean, that's an outlier. If we look at the church at large today, I don't hear that.
Yeah, no. Well, some of that's because what is presented to us is the celebrity pastors. I mean, they don't need to be. I mean, I'm not saying they don't. They do actually, but they don't need to be taken care of. They have their own world. They're entities. That's that I have a problem with that too, but it's a whole other world.
Yeah. That's been probably very. I mean, what's it been like? I mean, I guess you've already said this, but to just have people really care for you.
Well, I excuse me. I love the Village, and I love what God has created, and what I usually, when I go to different conferences or I go and sit and listen to other pastors, I don't know how. Like I listen to them, I'm like, wow, I'm so out of the loop in some ways, because in some ways the Village is sort of this modern but first century church. I mean, we gather together, the people devote their lives to the teaching of the elders, and they break bread together and they eat together and they pour out their financial their money for the people in need in the community, and they take care of their pastors as best they financially can. And so they really care about the community, and it's very first century like. So it's not translatable a lot of times. So it's been good. I mean, I love the Village. I think there's harder parts of it in some ways. I think one of the things that I obviously, when you start a church like the Village, you don't really think about is that 20 years in, and people have been committed to a mission, and you see that mission maturing, but they're also your friends. And over 20 years, I have like 100+ friends, and their kids are my friends. So when things go hard, or like I disappoint or I sin, or they it has this rippling effect across the community. And when the community, for the most part, is committed to trying to work that through, it kind of wrecks the whole community. It's not like, you have this oh, well, that's happening over here and nobody's impacted by this. Everybody's sort of impacted by everybody's experience in a lot of ways. And as a pastor, that feels it can feel very discouraging or overwhelming, or you feel loss both through death and through people leaving in more dramatic ways. I think maybe this is just me. I get worried about, well, does this person really feel cared by me, or am I actually caring for them? Because I used to have a very strong shepherding, kind of place in their life, and now they're in a place where they're walking in, I think with Jesus, and they're doing their thing. And now I've moved to another space, because I have limited time as the church grows. And so there are these stages of relationship that happen, if that makes any sense. Right.
So you have the stage of relationship. So what is that?
It's just
what's that like as you see them?
As a human being, it's like, well, I miss them sometimes.
Yeah.
Some of my friends are here at the Village who I haven't really spent a long time with in a long time. I haven't spent a lot of time with them in a long time. I miss them a lot. They're still participating in the Village, and they're still being shepherded and cared for. It just looks different, as things change. So I think there's some of that, is that, you have seasons with people. So I don't even remember what question I was answering, but
I don't know. We were talking about just being a pastor, and
yeah,
I think there's some loss when you have that happen.
Yeah, well,
they're still here, but
yeah, it's just changed. Nature of relationship, and then it'll come back. And one of the things that Emily McConnell told me that I really loved and helped me kind of frame, the Village, when I was sort of talking to her about this about 10 years ago. She said, "Look, Eric, if all you did was what the Village does 4 times a month, Like you came to church, you ate together, you pray. You are the way this church is. You are integrating and more connected to the people here in friendship and in life together than most of us are to our families. And that means a lot because basically you're having a big family gathering once a week. And so you are connecting. And I think that's important. Like I see Sundays as, the big family gathering around the table, I imagine it as the Italian kind of very noisy. Everybody's talking, everybody's engaged, everybody's like people are crying over here. People,
no mafia,
no mafia,
no crime.
But there's something just really rich about, when you think about Italians, you think about food, and you think about just the richness of family. Sure. and the laughter and the loudness and I think to me, so yeah, I see the village as just a big family that gets together, and there are grandpas and grandmas and uncles and aunts and the weird ones and the funny ones, but we all love each other deeply, even when we've hurt each other. And I think that's the powerful to me. But I think, you were talking about this a little bit earlier, just about like the waking up and the crying part. I think, yeah, I don't know. So I can hold it together for a sec. Yeah, and I think I resonate a lot with Paul when you hear him in Philippians, and you hear, like, I think like the anguish for his people is there, like it's not just, I think sometimes because I grew up in a family that, to be honest, is a little bit more on the depressive side than the joyous side. Yeah, we're very Eastern Europeans in our kind of like darkness, in our minor chords in our Russian music. But I think that there is just a weightiness to like longing for people to be healthy and to live lives that don't meet tragedy, and I think that's yeah. So I think and this is the thing every pastor deals with. It's just that as you watch your people walk through tragedy of their own making, and just with this crap world that we live in, it's a sorrow that you have to bear, that you can't fix anything for anyone. You can only pray and ask the Spirit to be present, right? And yeah, and you can obviously walk alongside. There's all those things, but you are powerless outside of the Spirit of God, and even then, we are confined to this, this world. God's sovereign will lays over our kind of improving life that we do.
Right. I'm going to take you back to there were the tears.
Sure.
Obviously, as I was listening and heard your pause, and what was underneath that? What were you? What happened? Just all of a sudden.
Sure. Well, I just think that there's, I resonate with what you were saying when we had coffee for a quick. You saw me at the coffee shop before this, and I think there's a weariness. Right, as you were talking about there, that comes upon you, and there's a gravity. I think the thing about pastoring a church for 20 plus years is there are stories, and stories of victory and stories of defeat and sorrow, and you walk in every one of those stories, right? I think when I think like Hannah and Steve, who were headed over to have dinner tonight, just to enjoy and hang out with them. And, I know the story, just one story of Miriam and cancer and victory over that, and the sorrow and the fear, and, all those kinds of things, and to see her, bright and smiley. That's also joyous, but it's a thing of tears, because it's a story of hardship and God's intervention. That's just one, so there's a preponderance of stories. And I think, even I've been kind of thinking about this, and just when I sit with people and do what someone else would call counseling, right? Whatever you want to call it, or soul care, or shepherding, or spiritual direction, any name you want to put on it. As a pastor for 20 years, I'm doing it with somebody I go to church with every week, and I see every Sunday, and and so there's a hard, I don't have there's not a separation. I'm deeply invested in this person's life.
Correct.
And I'm deeply invested in them succeeding in a different way, I would argue, than a counselor that they would go see.
Very much
Which
so.
makes me better and actually worse at what I do in that moment.
Well, I don't know. I'd say better.
Well, maybe. But my point is that my investment.
Your investment of yourself.
Yeah.
Every piece of your being.
Yeah.
Mind, will, emotions, longings
Sure.
of your heart. Everything is,
Yeah, it's all present in that. So I think, it's so there's it's full of ups and downs, and then you got your own human insecurities, right? Your own sense of value and where are you getting your worth from, and so it's being human's complicated, Dad.
Well, it sure is. Wow.
If you wish to hear more of the interview with Pastor Eric and his father, John Cepin, then head on over to Healing the City podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere that you might listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Healing the City podcast and to Faith Over Breakfast. Thank you.